It is now my pleasure to introduce our main speaker, Peche M. from Los Angeles. How did I start that?
Is there music? Whoa. Good evening. My name is Peche. I'm an alcoholic. This is mine, right? Just want to make sure. Welcome to all the newcomers. Alcoholics Anonymous is the fastest growing, largest group of people that never wanted to be here in the first place. And we just keep growing and growing and growing. And all the birthday shares really touched me, especially sought through prayer and medication. I listen. And Charlie's t-shirt looks like he's had it for 36 years. For those of you, those youngsters, if you don't know, you'll know if you learn. Grateful Dead were so awesome. Okay, so anyway, I have a sponsor. His name is Earl Hightower. I have some home groups down in Los Angeles, the Fledgling Society, and down in Orange County in Laguna Beach, we have a meeting called Monks and Drunks. We meet on Tuesday nights, 7:30 p.m. at the Canyon Club. You can always come on down or Zoom on in if you'd like to. Very solution-based meeting. And I have a sobriety date of June 16, 2007. That was the day of the rebirth. That's the day I got sober, a little over 17 and a half years ago. And I'm Persian, and I was born in Germany, and I was raised in Salt Lake City, Utah for the first portion of my life. So I definitely felt different. Uncomfortable, and my skin was like an understatement. Growing up in Utah was kind of rough, right? It was an era. It was like the late 70s. The older people probably remember that era. But for some reason, some people didn't like my kind. Like they didn't like my skin color and they didn't like my nationality, and they let me know about it. I was bullied, by some. So I was always like, just in fight or flight. But I remember my dad was more of a rageaholic, but on the weekends he liked to drink with his friends, and it was either cognac or beer. And I was the kid that was kind of doing the dizzy thing over in the corner, just like going in circles, like looking for an effect already. And my dad found it. He would like to give me sips off the cognac at like 8 years old, right? Cognac or beer, just little sips here and there, kind of just a little head change, right? He found it amusing, though. It'd fall on the ground a lot faster so he could like laugh with his friends. But I remember I went to this Persian wedding when I was 12, reluctantly. I did not want to go to who wants to go to a Persian wedding at 12, right? We did. And I don't know if you know about Persians, but Persians are very festive in their weddings. They eat a lot of the good Persian food, and they do all that dancing stuff, and they would mingle a lot, and they drink. And so I'm 12. I'm standing in the corner. I'm thinking, man, I don't want to be here, man. Like, how am I going to get the next 6 hours of my life back? And I'm looking at the clock, and I noticed that there's people that left all these half-drank drinks of champagne all over these tables. And so, the bored 12-year-old went over, and I took a little sip, and then I took a little whiff, and another sip, and it went down into my stomach, and I got that sense of ease and comfort. And that thing happened where we become bodily and mentally different than our fellows. And so I graciously helped them finish all of their half-drank drinks. And then I slid out on the dance floor, and I was break dancing and pop locking and doing moves that I didn't even know I knew how to do. And suddenly I was the life of the party, and I definitely wanted to be at this party, right? And 6 hours went by in a flash, and I remember my dad came and told me it's time to go. And I said, what do you mean we're going? What are you talking about? We just got started. And he stuck me in the backseat of the car, and my mom and dad were driving me home, and I was in the backseat having my own little party back there, right? Slurring my words, my eyes are rolling in the back of my head, and I remember my dad chuckled and looked at my dad and my mom and said, "Look at Peche, he's on a good one," right? And they took me home, and they took me and stuck me in my bed, and I blacked out. It was the first time I experienced a blackout. And in the middle of that blackout, I wet the bed, and I threw up in the bed, and I woke up the next morning, and I said, I've arrived. I must do that over again. Because for the first time in my life, I felt comfortable in my skin, and I wanted to chase that sensation and that feeling that came with it. And so we used to, when you live in a cold, miserable state like Utah, and you have the opportunity to come to California, because we had some cousins that lived out here in the valley in LA, we'd come usually around this time of year. January was a good time to come because it'd be freezing cold there, and we'd land here. And for me, it was like shocking. I get off the plane, there's no snow on the ground, and you could go down to the beach and catch some rays, or you could there was like that whole Hollywood thing or Disneyland, and the palm trees gave it sort of like a tropical effect. So for me, this was paradise. And I would often beg my dad, like, what can we do to move out of this cold, miserable state? Let's move to California, Dad, please. And he said, you never know, the opportunity might arise. And then it happened. One day he came home from work. I was 15 years old, I remember. He said, I got a job opportunity. We're moving to LA. I'm like, really? When are we moving? He said, in 2 weeks. I said, I'll start packing now. And within 2 weeks, we're on a plane, we're flying out here, and my dad must have thought the whole state of California was Los Angeles, because we didn't move to LA. We moved to the big old city of Costa Mesa. And it would suffice, because, it wasn't that far from LA, and, I was a sophomore, and I remember I walked up to my high school, and it was kind of a culture shock, because I looked around and saw, wow, like, this is a lot different. There's all different types of people here, as opposed to the white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Mormons that I grew up around, right? Because I was the token brown boy in that scene, but now it was like a melting pot. But I walked into my high school, I was like, this is great, I could get down with this. I remember I got a job on Harbor Boulevard in Costa Mesa at this McDonald's, barely turning 16, and I'm flipping burgers one day. My very first day, and this guy named Carlos was flipping burgers with me. And he said, hey, Estee, are you new in town? I go, yeah, I'm new in town. He goes, you smoke weed? I go, absolutely I smoke weed. He said, you drink? I go, yes, I drink too. He said, well, after work, you want to go down, we could go down to Harbor Boulevard and go have some fun. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So we get off of work around 9:30 p.m., and the 16-year-old and the 32-year-old are driving down Harbor Boulevard. And I don't know what's on the other end of this ride, but it sounds like it's going to be a good time, right? And we get down, and we pull into this parking lot of this gray, dingy, seedy-looking motel, right? And we get out of the car. The place was called the Motor Inn, right? Like, it lived up to its name, whatever. So we get out of the car, and he tells me, sit on this curb right here real quick. I'll be right back. And I watch him. I went upstairs into this room, and I'm sitting on this curb. And I'm waiting for this guy like 15, 20 minutes. I'm like, where is this guy? And so I got tired of waiting. I saw what room he went into. I ran up the stairs and went and started pounding on the door. Boom, 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 boom. And the door swings open, and there's a lady standing there with a baby in her arms. And her body looked like she was 35 years old, but her face looked like she was 65, like snaggletooth looking. The baby's crying. There's a kid playing in the front room. I can't see the kitchen from the front room because there's some clothes that were drawn there. And I said, excuse me, miss, where's Carlos? And she says, well, he's back there in the kitchen. You can go back there and talk to him. So I go back in the kitchen, and I look around, and I don't see anything. I see a kitchen table. I see some stuff that's lined up on the kitchen table. I've never seen that before, except for on Miami Vice. And I'm like, Carlos, where are you? Are you back here? And all of a sudden, his head pops up from behind the table. And he's like, oh, I forgot about you. I'm like, you forgot about me? And so he breaks me off. He gives me a little bit of weed. He gives me a little bit of alcohol, and I smoke it, and I drink it, and I look at my watch, and I'm thinking, now it's getting late. Like, I got to get home. So I just jetted out of there, started running down Victoria Boulevard, and I remember I'm thinking, like, how am I going to get to my house without my parents waking up, right? And right when I got to my house, like a ninja in the night, I climbed up this tree really quietly. I got up on my roof. I put one leg into the bedroom window. I put the other leg in there, just slid my body in very quietly. It was very dark. I thought, I'm going to get away with this, right? And I'm looking around, like, it's so dark. Like, where's the lights? Where's the light switch? And finally, I find the light switch. I turn it on, and my mom is laying in my bed wide awake. With that look that our mothers get on their face, it's like, son, where have you been? Why are your eyes so red? What's that I smell in your breath? Wait till your dad deals with you in the morning. Oh, the wrath of my father, that angry man, right? He could either be, he's hot or cold. He's either really mad or really happy, but you'll know it, right? And so the next day they sat me down and they had their little come to Jesus conversation with me. And in the doctor's opinion, it says frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. So there's two different conversations with mom and dad the next day, right? So my dad he's just an angry guy. Rah, rah, rah. Like, I don't hear any of it, right? I don't know what the hell he's talking. He's just a madman, right? But mom, she comes a little softer with her spiel. Son, who are these people you're hanging out with? You're better than this. You were so scholastic and artistic and athletic. Maybe we made a big mistake. Maybe you're going to the wrong school. Maybe we need to put you in a different school for a better education. And I don't hear any of that. I just want to go wherever the fun is, right? And so now they transfer me to a whole new school. And of course, I'm now 16. Like, this is the era, the high school era, where everything we saw in the movies is happening in real life, right? The people are talking about so-and-so's parents are leaving town this Friday night, and the party's at their house, and we need to be at that house. And of course, I automatically gravitate to the two people that are having the most fun in that entire school, Amir and Omid. Now, Amir was this Indian guy, and Omid was Persian like me. In our language, the word Omid means hope, but there was no hope for Omid. This kid was an animal. I'm telling you, like, the only really I didn't really care for Omid and who he was, but he had a car. So we needed the car to get to the party. Like, really, that's why I hung out with Omid. And so we'd find ourselves on a Friday night caravanning around town, a bunch of cars all following each other to go to that high school party. But along the way, I'd say, Omid, like, we got to stop and get some liquor. And he said, well, how are we going to do that if we're not of age? I said, don't even worry, I got this. And we roll up to this liquor store, and you know, I see some scrub walking in. He looks like he's of age. And I went up to him and I'm like, hey, yo, man, check this out. If I give you a little bit of extra money, will you buy me some booze and some cigarettes? Dude's like, sure, no problem. Goes in. And at that point, it's a crapshoot. Like, I don't discriminate when it comes to alcohol, right? The guy could go in and come out with a bottle of peppermint schnapps, which it might be that on a certain night. I know some of you guys drank peppermint schnapps. Don't act innocent. Or a bottle of JD. I'm Persian. I like the Goldschlager because it has the little gold flakes, and I'm a little bougie like that, right? But really what I'm after is the effect that's produced by alcohol. Because if I could pull a few of those back, by the time we get to the party, that thing where it talks about Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, I'm a different guy now, right? Like, I walk into the party, if I have enough of the homies around me, we might have a nice alcoholic brawl tonight, right? Take out that alcoholic rage. Or suddenly I become a Casanova. Like, I walk up to women that are way out of my league, girls I would never dare talk to sober, and I feel like I have all the right words, right? And what have I got to lose? I might get slapped across my face, or I might get a little honey on my arm that night. So it kind of seemed like alcohol was serving its purpose. And then all the expeditions going down to Mexico. Like, when we found out there's no last call for alcohol, we immediately got the fake IDs. And down there, we were having the little run-ins with the federalities and going to those nightclubs down. If you know, you know, right? Those nightclubs, Bambi's and places like that. So I found my way into a Mexican jail, and I'm here to report to you that the Mexican jails are not as well put together as the ones here in America. There's dirt floors and cockroaches and mice, and that's where my alcoholism was kind of starting to go in that direction. Now, I turned 17 a year late. The average kid gets their driver's license at 16, but I don't know where I was. My head was in the clouds. I got this, my dad gave me his 1971 Super Beetle Volkswagen Bug, yellow, right? I was so proud that I'm going to have my car the next day to drive to school. So I got smashed drunk the night before, and the next day I was a little hungover. I called all my friends and I said, everybody be in front of your houses. I'm going to pick all you guys up to take you to school in my car. And they said, okay. So one by one, I'm picking up all these guys, and we're all piling into this Volkswagen Bug, 6 of us, right? And it had rained the night before, so the streets were wet. And we were just high school kids having high school fun. We're on our way to school. We're driving. The music's blaring. Windows are rolled down. You can smell the fresh lemon trees in the air. And out of nowhere, we get closer to this intersection, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this 14-year-old kid was on his bicycle. He darts right out in the street in front of my car, and I couldn't hit the brakes fast enough, and this kid's bicycle and body went over the hood of my car. And his body hit the windshield shattered, and I couldn't see in front of me, and the car kept rolling and crashed into this minivan, and this kid's body went over the minivan headfirst in the ground. And I got out of the car, and I tasted blood trickling down my face from the impact of the windshield. And I looked at my friends, and they had blood all over their faces. And I thought in one instance, like, did I just hit a human body? I went and looked around the side of the minivan and saw the kid laying down, face down, with blood gushing out the top of his head. And I thought, oh my God, I'm in trouble. I am in big trouble. And the police came, and the ambulance came, and the ambulance whisked the kid off to the hospital, and the police took me down to the police station. They asked me all kinds of questions, shining the light in my eyes, and I wasn't under the influence, and after they asked their questions, they released me. So I went home, and I didn't know what to do with myself. You know, for 4 days, I was on the edge of my seat wondering, like, what's going to happen next? The mom had the kid on life support, and she was indecisive. She didn't know if she was going to take him off of life support. If she would have kept him on, he would have been a complete vegetable for the rest of his life because of the impact of his brain. So she ended up asking them to have him lose his life. And how does a 17-year-old process something like that, right? Like, what am I supposed to do with myself now? So I just started drinking and using in excess. I mean, I was just going hard to the point where I was getting in trouble all the time. I was getting arrested all the time. I got kicked out of the regular high school, went to the continuation school where, if you know, like those schools, there's nothing good that happens in there. I mean, if I showed up, right? And then police interaction a lot. I was finding my way into holding cells and things like that. And finally, I found my way into a juvenile court. And I remember the judge called me to the stand and said, "Mr. Algamano, we don't see you fit to be on the streets. You're a complete menace to society. You've accumulated all these crimes over the last few months, and on top of that, you have a vehicular manslaughter charge without gross negligence riding over your head. Therefore, we see it fit to put you in juvie for 1 year." So they sentenced me for 1 year at juvenile hall. And the second I walked into boys receiving that night when I was in my cell, I mean, I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I didn't know what to think, and I was in so much fear. I must have said something where they thought I was a danger to myself. So they took me out of that unit and put me in this other unit, which was the psych portion. And they put me on suicide watch, and I would sit in my cell and just count the bricks on the wall, feeling like I was going insane, just thinking, what has become of my life? Like, how did I end up here? And I renounced God. I stopped believing in anything greater than myself, because I thought, if there was such thing as God, why would God take that kid's life from him? And if there was such thing as God, why would God put me in this situation when I was somewhat of a normal kid not that long ago? And so when you're locked down for 21 hours a day, 22 hours a day, and they pop your door for whatever given reason, you'll take it. So if they said on Sunday mornings, "Anybody want to go to Mass? Let's go. I'll go to church," right? Anything to get me out of the cell. And then suddenly on Saturday mornings, they'd pop our door and they'd say, "Anybody want to hear a message of hope?" And I had no idea what that meant, but if it gets me out of the cell for an hour, I'm down. Let's go. And so I'd go down this long hallway into this classroom type setting, and this old man would come in, and he had this big blue book. And he had this AA panel, and he would read to us out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you have to understand, I'm 17. Come on. Like, I got a lot of mileage on me, right? Like, there's no way I was ready to receive a message of hope, but I do believe in those moments, those days when he would read out of the big book, that a seed was planted. And it was a weak seed, but a seed nonetheless. And my mom was doing everything that she could on the outs. Like, she was writing letters, getting petitions signed, getting all the people in the neighborhood, the teachers, everyone involved just to try to get her son out sooner. And she was going through a separation with my dad, which didn't sit well with me. See, we came to this country as a 4-family unit, and now we were splitting apart. And I'm locked up while this is happening, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't even sound right to me, right? I did get out on good behavior, and by that time they were separated, so I was between homes for a little while, and I would go stay with my mom for a while, and we'd be good for a little bit, and then we'd get into it, and I'd leave her house and say, "I'm just going to go to Dad's house," and back and forth, and in that time I turned 18. And one day my dad got in my face, and the violent man that he was didn't realize that I'm 18 now. I'm big enough and strong enough to hold my own, and I ended up putting my hands on that man. And it scared him so bad that he sat me down the next day and said, "Listen, this isn't working out. I provided for you for long enough, and I'm not obligated to you anymore. You're 18 years old now. You can take care of yourself. This is the apartment." My mom moved up to Santa Monica, and here I was, this 18-year-old kid, still wet behind the ears, with no home training, no guidance from a male figure, dying from alcoholism and not even knowing it, right? And so I entered my young adulthood. Throughout my 20s, we didn't have friends that were overdosing and dying on fentanyl. There wasn't anything like that around. We were going to raves and shit, and nightclubs and strip clubs. Like, we were drinking, we were doing the love drugs, right? Ecstasy, cocaine, all that stuff, right? It was a scene. It was truly a scene. And I'm not going to lie, like, we had a lot of fun during those times. And all throughout my young adulthood, probably around the time I was 25 years old, had you seen me from the outside, the people I would hang out with would think, "Peche's got it going on. All the girls, all the friends, this, that. But deep within the pit of my belly, there was always this sense of impending doom. Like, I don't know what is wrong with me. Like, what is wrong with me? And when you're in Alcoholics Anonymous, we often talk about this God-sized hole. And I'm clear on the fact that I was filling the void that was within with drugs and alcohol all throughout my 20s. And then I turned 30, and I had already created some wreckage for myself. And so I moved back in with my mom, who moved back down to Orange County for a little while. And I got into a lot of trouble at her house. And I ended up getting arrested, and I was back in the system again. And I don't know about you, but during the 90s, I never slept. Like, there was certain things we did where we never slept. So if you incarcerated me, I would just sleep for days and days and days. And finally, I slept for so many days that Some cholo came walking through one day and said, H&I is coming through. Anybody want to hear a message of hope? And I said, H&I, what does that even stand for? Homies and inmates? They said, no, fool. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. Get off your rack and come down here. I'm like, oh, man, begrudgingly, I get off of my rack. I'm like, must we do this? And I'd sit down amongst my inmates, right? My peers. And these two dudes would walk in, and they looked pretty well put together. They came to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. But you got to understand, like, I'm Mr. Contempt prior to investigation. I'm going to judge you for even coming down here. I'm going to sit there and listen to these people share their experience, strength, and hope, and wonder about them. Why are they whining to us? Because you can't hold your liquor? You come down here to complain to us? It's Thursday. You should be at home with your wife and kids watching Thursday night football. I don't think that every single solitary time that I end up in jails and institutions and situations, it surrounds itself around my alcoholism and the bad decisions that I make. So grandiose and so egocentric, right? And finally, the time came that I got to get out of there, and I tried to go back and stay with my mom, but she wasn't having it. She took me to this Persian sober living down in Huntington Beach. And I remember when we showed up to this place, we parked the car, we got up, we went and knocked on the door, and the door opened really slowly, and this guy answered the door, and he looked like a little Persian recovery Yoda. I'm not kidding. He even sounded like Yoda with a Persian accent. It's like, hello, how are you doing? Welcome. This is sober living. We have rules, we have regulations, we have chores, we go to meetings. I'm like, riveting. Like, what's your name? He says, my name is Sia. I go, Mr. Sia, with all due respect, it's a nice place you have here. I saw the rooms. I'm not staying here. I didn't stay at his house. I went to this other guy's house. His name was Dave Regal, God rest his soul. But Dave, I didn't know what I was in for. I should have just stayed at that house. I went to Dave Regal's, and I must have puffed out my chest when I walked in, and Dave just looked at me and said, you listen here, kid. You just get out of the jailhouse? I said, yes, sir. He goes, you keep your jailhouse mentality in the jailhouse. When you're in my house, you go to one meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous every single day. Are we clear? And I said, yes, sir. All right. So I was sentenced to AA meetings by Dave Regal. And the PO wanted me to get that little court card signed. So I'd go to this place called the Newport Club. Oh, man. I mean, I would sit in there and think, oh, man, I'm back in AA again. Like, I'd sit there. Back then, the upstairs room, they had these leather couches, and you could smoke cigarettes in the room. You know, I would sit there and just judge you all. I'd think, these losers, man, every single day they come here and complain about the same thing. And I never shared once. I had nothing to share with you. I never identified as alcoholic. As a matter of fact, I didn't even tell you my real name. I was Brian amongst you, right? And then, like, they would have this round-robin meeting where everybody was required to share for 1 minute in the circle. It's like, are you kidding me right now? So it'd get to me and I'd be like, pass, move it along, next guy, him, go, got nothing for you. And then one day I talked to my boy Pete, who'd been like an avid member of Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, but not really wanting to be here. And he said, Peche, why do you go to AA? I'm like, Dave Regal makes us go to a meeting a day. And plus I got to get the little court card signed so that I could prove to my PO I'm going to AA meetings. He goes, don't you know the secret sauce? I go, what's that? He said, Peche, you could sign your own court card and nobody needs to know. What? What do you mean? He goes, well, think about it, Peche. You think your PO knows the secretary of the meeting? It's anonymous. I'm like, oh my God, that's ingenious. So I started signing my own court card with different colored pens. People at work, I'd tell them, could you just put your little signature right there? Thank you very much. And I worked my way right out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And by doing it my way, I ran my life into the ground. Between 30 to 35 years old, I got into a lot more trouble, and then I found myself as a homeless man living out of my car in Costa Mesa. And I remember, like, I don't know about you, like when you're not doing well, there's always that one friend that is actually probably the person that'll tell you everything that's good for you, but you don't want to hear from him. So that one guy showed up one day, and I'm laying in my car, finally catching some Z's, and he came up and tapped on my window. Hey, Peche. I'm like, what's up? He goes, Peche, you don't look like you're doing too well. I'm like, thanks for letting me know. I said, Peche, you're homeless. I'm like, hey. Let's not attach the word homeless to my name. Homeless are the people that sleep in those tents. Like, that's bottom of the barrel homeless, right? Homeless are the people that sleep in the storefronts right on the asphalt. That is just beyond homeless. Like, if anything, I still have a car, right? Like, I'm executive homeless. We can call it that. And he said, well, you're without a home, so you're still homeless. I said, all right, well, thanks for letting me know. You can go ahead and take off now. And finally, after trying to do that for a few months, I decided to go to a friend's house and detox on his couch. Now, you have to understand, detoxing in Peche's style means to quit doing meth, heroin, and cocaine. But I can still drink, and I can still smoke weed. That's not detoxing. That's just quitting heavy stuff. And some things started to happen. I started having some health conditions. I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest due to those one substances that make you go really fast. And my liver was kind of shutting down a little bit. And a series of other events happened too, where I just had these realizations, like these aha moments of clarity. And I decided one day I remember being in these rooms and hearing people stay sober, but I didn't understand what staying sober meant, right? And so I decided to call for help. What does every so-called gangster do when they run out of options? They call their mommy. And I called Mom, and she was a brown belt Al-Anon, well, like active member of Al-Anon at this point. So the conversation is much different. She answered the phone and she said, what do you want? What do I want? Mom, it's Peche. It's your son. I don't have a son. What do you mean you don't have a son? You gave birth to me. I was your son. You were raising me. She goes, you're dead to me. Dead to you? What are they teaching you, those Al-Anon classes? I lost my son when he was an adolescent. I don't know what's overtaken this, but if you want help, I have a phone number. I could give it to you. Would you like that? I said, sure. What's his name and number? She said, his name is Max, and you can write down his number. I wrote down his number, and she said, did you write it down? I said, yep, and she went, click. My mom never hung up on me before, right? I could not pull the wool over that woman's head anyway. I knew it. And so I waited a few days, and finally I called his phone number, Mr. Max. My name is Peche. How are you? And he said, well, I'm good. How are you? I said, I think I'm good. He goes, well, how can I help you? And I said, oh, I think I want to get sober. He said, you think you want to get sober? I said, no, I want to get sober. I said, okay, when do you want to get sober? I said, today's Tuesday. How about Friday? I had some affairs to attend to, some things to finish up. So Friday morning, he led me to this house in Irvine, California. He told me to be there at 9 a.m. sharp. I'm still punctual, even when I'm not well, right? I showed up at 9 a.m. sharp. I actually was up at 7 a.m. in the neighborhood, scouring the whole neighborhood just to make sure everything's intact and the house is actually there. And finally, I rolled up to the house. I parked the car. I went up. I knocked on the door, and the door opened really slowly. And lo and behold, it was the little Persian recovery Yoda from 5 years before. Hello, how are you doing? Welcome. I'm like, I know you. I can't shake this guy. I looked right at his eyes. I was like, I know you. You had a house on Beach Boulevard, Huntington Beach, 5 years ago, did you not? Yes, I did. Do you remember I came and checked out the house? No, I don't. How do you not remember this mug? He said, because I only remember the ones that stay. I said, fair. What do we need to do? I'm here. So he brought me in for his intake process, and I told him, before we do your little intake process, there's two things that might keep me from moving into your house. As if they have the privilege of me moving into the recovery home. What are your conditions? I said, one is I don't believe in God. I don't ever want to talk about God. Do not try to sell me on the God idea. No God for me. Oh, we don't talk about God very much. I said, okay, cool. We're off to a good start. The other thing is I don't ever want to go to any meetings. No AA meetings, CA meetings, NA meetings, no meetings. No 12-step meetings. Are we clear? Oh, we don't go to many meetings. I said, okay, no problem. Sign me up. Where do I sign? I signed the paper. That night, we were in a meeting. Next day, we were in a meeting at noon, and then that night, we were in a meeting. We were in 2 meetings a day for the entire duration of my stay. I don't think Mr. Sia was working an honest program. And man, this guy would send me to these noon meetings where I remember I was 35 going on 36. I walked up into this room, half the size of this, but it was packed with just crusty old-timers. I'm like, I'm in my 30s. Like, this is AA? Seriously? Just an ocean of silver hair. And I would sit down, and remember, I'm Mr. Contempt prior to investigation. I'm the inventory taker that none of you know about. There's conversations going on in this head about all of you. The way you share, the way you look, how many times you share. I mean, I'm sitting over here with the itty-bitty shitty committees in full effect in my head, right? And there was these 5 dudes that would sit against the wall. They would be there every single day religiously. Now, the room called them the Romeos. These guys, to me, nothing about them looked Romeo-like, right? They looked like dinosaurs, if anything. They were every once in a while, their hands would go up, and you'd hear one of them share something like, we could go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, or we could accept spiritual help. It's like, oh my God, that was profound. It was as if it was out of a book or something. But the conversations were steady flowing in my head. And, here's the type of stuff that I was thinking. Oh, there he goes again. That guy's going to share again. Shares every single day. Pretty much the same share. I could pretty much recite his share for him, word for word, verbatim. Loves to hear himself talk. Timer's gone off twice. He's still talking. And watch, he's going to say hallelujah at the end of it because everyone's going to repeat hallelujah. Oh, here she goes. I love when this one shares. Man, she doesn't share enough. I wish she would share every day. This is the only time I could stare at a woman in an AA meeting for 5 minutes straight without being a complete creeper. And then it happened. One day, some guy way in the back of the room raised his hand, and I was probably 90 days sober, zeroed in on him, laser focused. What does he have to contribute to our group today? And this guy busted out with this share that it was so powerful. I mean, it carried a message of depth and weight. It was profound. It was humorous. It was everything. It felt like his share just reached into my chest and gripped my heart without my consent. And I started busting up from the bottom of my belly. I hadn't laughed that hard since I was a little kid. And I realized in that moment that the language of the heart had been captured. I was so excited. I was like, I have to be a part of this thing. I got to do whatever we got to do around here. I don't know what we do, but I got to do it. And I ran out to the No Boozer Cruiser, and we went back to the house. And I ran up into the house to find Mr. Sia. I'm like, Mr. Sia, I'm a grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, what happened in that meeting? I go, this guy, he shared it was everything. What did he share? I have no idea. I just know I need to be here. And he went on to tell me that, he basically told me, it's good that you're now a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but just because you like the fellowship and you're a member of the fellowship, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's all AA. He also told me that there's 3 sides of the triangle, and now that I've recognized the unity, which is the fellowship, there's 2 other sides I've been neglecting. He said, you needed to have a sponsor 2 weeks ago, and if you don't have one by tomorrow, you're going to get a nice writing assignment. That's the type of house that guy had, a lot of writing assignments. I said, no, I'll have one by tomorrow, no problem. And sure enough, I got this guy, Amir. He was my first sponsor, and Amir was a real one. He was a good dude. I mean, his aura was just attractive, right? And I remember I had my eye on him for a while. I was just totally shy. I was scared. I didn't want to bother him, right? But I remember I called him. I said, Amir, will you be my sponsor? And he asked me if I was willing to go any lengths for victory over alcohol. I have no idea what that means, but yes, I am, right? And sure enough, that man would come down to my recovery home, and he'd take me in the backyard. He'd take me to Starbucks, or he'd take me to a park, and he'd take me through that big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, page by page, line by line, word by word, and broke it down for me. And it wasn't that he knew where the prayers and the promises were intertwined all throughout the book. They were in there. And it wasn't that he knew the definitions behind the words. He knew all that. Or the meanings behind the paragraphs. He knew all that. He had a working knowledge of the big book. But this man's essence was Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, he demonstrated altruism at its finest. He would give of himself. That man talked the talk and he walked the walk, and you knew it, right? And to this day, he's still one of my very best friends. And my experience with the steps is, step 1, what's the problem? Lack of power is my dilemma. I do a lot of things real good, but when it comes to using and drinking, I'm absolutely insane. And step 2, what's the solution? I need a power that will relieve me of the obsession to use, to drink, and to seek that soundness of mind, just to quiet that mind. And in step 3, I turn my will and my life over to something that I'm not exactly sure what it is. Like, I stopped believing in God at a very young age. At 17, I renounced God. So now I come in here and you guys want me to turn my will and my life over to something that I don't even believe in? But I sit in your rooms and I listen to how you guys talk about your higher power. And then afterwards, I'm a question asker, and I'll go up to people and say, tell me about your connection with your higher power. How did it happen? And as I'm taking mental notes and sometimes written notes, then I take it home and I start praying. And when I would pray, I started to feel this power that was flowing in and through me within a couple of weeks. And that's the warmth of God. That's the power of God. And I'm very, very clear on the fact that God was always there. I was the one that was lost. So I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and find a God that was never even lost. This made it a lot easier to do a 4th step. I got to swallow some large chunks of truth about myself. And when I sat down with my sponsor and read him my 5th step, my life story, he related with me and God supervised the whole scenario. I never felt God's presence so much as I did in that moment. In 6 and 7, I asked God to remove my defects of character, because left to my own devices, I'll probably remove the wrong ones. In 8, I have this list. I need to go out to the people. Am I almost done? Okay, good. I go out and look people in the eyes and I tell them, I was wrong, I hurt you, I harmed you, what can I do to make it right? Knowing the exact natures of my wrong, I never want to harm you again. And 10, I continue to take personal inventory. And if I come short, I clean up where I mess up. I promptly admit it. It doesn't even feel good to shit on people anymore. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to cuss, right? 11, I meditate to listen for the answers and seek the knowledge of God's will. And I pray, just thanking God for another day. Because today I'm blessed. You know, I'm blessed that I just woke up breathing. There's a lot of people that die in their sleep, right? And 12 is where the magic's at, right? A lot of people say in the program, there's a lot of parrots in the program. They'll say stuff because it sounds cute. They'll say things like, we're not in the results business, but it says in the 12th step, as a result of these steps, I've not only overcome the using and drinking problem, but the stinking thinking problem. You know, I don't have a disease that's doing push-ups out in the parking lot. If that was the type of program that I was in, I would probably end up getting loaded again. Like when I wake up at the top of the morning, I ask my Creator, how can I go out and do your bidding? Like, what do you got in store for me, God? I'm at your service. You know, I want whatever, and it never fails. People will call. A mother will call. My kid's on fentanyl in Kentucky. Or some guy will call from Santa Ana and say, I'm walking the streets. What can I do? And I always know what they can do. They could come into the program, they could sober up, and they could work these steps and have a big, beautiful life. Now, a lot's happened over the last 17 and a half years. I know December 24th, 2016, I had a friend that called me. Her name was Cindy. She said she's a friend and a masseuse and had a massage table. And she's totally broken, couldn't get her kids any Christmas presents. She asked if she could come over to my house, give me a massage for some extra money. And I said, absolutely. And she came over to my house, and as she was massaging, she said, Peche, you know you have a lump on your neck. And I didn't even pay attention to it. And the next day I went and saw my friend Stephanie, and I brought her and her daughter some gifts. And then Stephanie said, Peche, you know you have a lump on your neck and it's moving. So I thought, well, Cindy said it yesterday. She said it today. This might be something. Next day I went down to Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach, and usually Christmas Day or the day after is like a madhouse in any hospital. So it took a long time for me to get in, and finally when I got in, they did some blood work, and they said, your blood work came back fine, but we got to do something about that lump. So then they did extensive tests, and pretty much I was hospitalized. There was a misdiagnosis, and then they finally found out that I had stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I had cancer. And during that time, I got into a friendship with a girl from the fellowship who then it kind of developed into a relationship. And in a sense, she was sort of like a caretaker and a lot of I love yous, and the honeymoon era is always so nice. So nice. And there was a lot of red flags, which Peche is just a professional. I would just paint them green and just go with it, right? And during the process of chemo, probably about 5 months in, something happened to where she got very violent with me, and then the police were called, and guess who went to jail that night? Not her. So the night before I was turning 10 years sober, I was sitting in a jail cell in Laguna Beach thinking, what? Like 10 years sober and I'm locked up? Like who would have thought I would be back in the system again? But I bailed out immediately, and then I ended up calling an attorney from Alcoholics Anonymous, a good lady that actually was representing me. And I was at the Canyon Club. It was about 2 weeks later. I was supposed to go to court the next day for this case, and I was a fill-in secretary sitting at a table right in front of the podium at the Canyon Club. And there was a room full of people. It was a hot June night. And somebody opened up this back window because it was so warm to let some air in, and all of a sudden something came flying in this room and flew over everybody's head, just buzzing around. And I was thought, what is that? Is that a horsefly? That thing's coming right at me. And then as it got close, I'm like, that's not a horsefly, it's a hummingbird. And since when do hummingbirds fly at night? And this thing's coming right at me. Everybody had to duck their heads, and as it got closer, I felt its wing flap right by my ear, hit the podium, landed on the ground. I thought, oh my God, I hope it didn't die. I went to go pick it up, and I picked it up and looked at him right in the eyes, and I felt like I was looking in the eyes of God. And it was alive, started flapping its wings again, flew out of my hands, went right back, knew exactly where it came in the back of the room, right out the window. The next morning, I put on a suit, ready to go down to the courthouse, meet my attorney, have her represent me. I'm making some eggs in the kitchen. It was a little bit warm. I open up the side window to let some air come through. And suddenly the sparrow comes and flies right into my living room and lands on the ground. I'm like, come on, man. 2 birds in 2 days? Is it odd or is it God? This thing just sitting there looking at me, like gave me a side eye. Almost looked like he was smiling at me, right? And then he flies out into freedom. I go down to the courthouse. I'm sitting in the courtroom. They call me to the stand, and the judge says, Mr. Algamon, you're here today? And I said, yes, I am. And she called the other party, and the party didn't show up, and she hit her gavel and said, you're free to go. It's those moments. It's those moments. If we're really paying attention around here and we're in a God-conscious state, we'll see God sprinkling God's existence in every scenario. When I had 7 years sober, I spoke at this meeting called the Wild Bunch down in OC. Truly, they are a wild bunch, right? Once I was done giving my talk, everybody lined up to thank me. And I saw this guy, my eyes locked on this one dude in the back of the room that looked very angry, right? He was just like standing there mean mugging me, and I was like, man, I don't think I want to shake this guy's hand, let alone hug him. He looks dangerous. I don't think he likes me. And he kept getting closer. He kind of had Igor vibes. And as he got closer, he comes up, and he's like, hey, Peche, what's up? Remember me? And I said, you look familiar. What's your name? He goes, it's me, Jason. I go, Jason. He goes, yeah, Jason, we used to get high under the bleachers in high school. I go, you're in AA. He goes, yeah, I'm 11 months sober, Peche. Can you believe that? I go, that's great. You want to hear something crazy, Peche? I'm the caretaker of the mother of the kid that you hit on that bike. I was like, dude, can I get your number, please? And I got his phone number. Right after the meeting, I went out and called my sponsor and asked him. I said, I have a direct connection to the mother of this kid. And he said, Peche, weren't you sober that morning? I said, yeah. He goes, why don't you let that lady heal the way that she's been healing? You don't need to talk to her. Keep doing what you're doing in Alcoholics Anonymous. Your primary purpose is to help addicts and alcoholics. Just keep doing that. Let that lady heal the way that she is. You don't need to put salt on the wound. 3 weeks later, I'm at Trader Joe's. I'm pushing my cart. I love Trader Joe's, by the way. I'm pushing my cart. I go around the corner, and all of a sudden I look and see my friend Jason. And now he's got to be coming up on a year. He said 11 months. It's 3 weeks later. I want to go up and see what's up. And I stopped dead in my tracks, and I thought, oh my God, and I looked and saw the mother, the little frail old lady pushing the cart behind him, and I thought, that's the mom. Again, these things don't happen by accident. I would have missed it all. We stick around here, and we will always see how God is working in our lives, doing for us what we can't do for ourselves. I have such a beautiful life today. I mean, it is just out of this world. I got this awesome girlfriend that God just put after all those red flags. God put the perfect one in my life. She's of maximum service to so many people, to men, to women. I call her the newcomer whisperer. You guys want to hear something funny? When we're fighting sometimes, I'll tell her, you make me nervous when I'm speaking. Don't come to any of my talks because I feel like you're judging me. So tonight we're sitting here, and she says, because she's from New York, so she's got that beautiful New York accent, she says to me, Peche, when I'm sitting like this, I'm not judging you. I'm just holding my boobs up because they get really heavy. I told her I was going to say it from the podium, and she didn't believe me. I had to say it because I love you so much. I know, I'm done right now. So I just want to say that today I have this beautiful relationship with my mother. My mom is a black belt in Al-Anon. I have an awesome relationship with my father. There's no more arguments. He's also in Al-Anon. My sister, I have a whole host of friends. These guys, we all went to dinner before. I've been up here in Santa Barbara just hanging out, with her, just enjoying ourselves. I would have missed it all, man. I'm telling you, man. God is so big in my life. And I'm so grateful to all of you that came here tonight because the streets of Ventura are a little bit safer tonight. Thank you for letting me share.